ghosts, vampires, witches. Nah, that's nothing. You know what's really scary? Fighting drug dealers. Oh my god. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Hello homies, welcome to Thumb Together. Today we're going to be talking about Sicario Day of the Soldado together. My name is Andrew Fantasia. Thanks so much for watching. As always, if you enjoy this sexy little review, then go ahead and give it a thumbs up and maybe give some love to that subscribe button as well. The first Sicario movie was one of my favorite movies of whatever year it came out. My memory is fading away, but whatever year that was, I loved Sicario to death. I don't know how long it was, but let's say if it was 110 minutes, because I think that's about right. It was 110 minutes of just constant tension building up to this finale that rocked my socks. But when I heard they were making a sequel to that, I was a little bit iffy. I was like, does that really warrant a sequel? That's not that kind of movie. It's a very dark, very dreary, disturbing movie. It kind of ended where it needed to end, and it made its point, and it was a great point. So I was like, do we need Sicario 2? Is this really necessary? At this point, I'm okay with the fact that this exists, because Emily Blunt's character is no longer in it. Her arc in the first one was so complete and so good that you don't need her. And to have brought her back, I think would have ruined it. I think that would have been a case of bad sequelitis, of which there is no cure. We're having a telethon later this year to try to find a cure. So is Sicario Day of the Soldado a worthy successor to the first one? I'm going to say yes, it's worthy, but it's not as good as the first. It's still very good, and it's a lot more of the same kind of thing, but it doesn't quite have the impact the first one did. First of all, this is a very hard R movie, okay? There's swears left and right, the most violent shit you will ever see in your life. One of the opening sequences of Day of the Soldado involves an ISIS terrorist attack. At least I think it's ISIS. Somebody mentions ISIS at some point. But these terrorists walk into what looks like a dollar store or something, and they're all wearing, bomb vests. And there's about 5 of them, and one by one they all blow themselves up and take the store out with them. And all the people in the store. And the way they shot that was very, very true to the Sicario method. It was very disturbing. It was very raw and real looking. It put you right there. It made you feel like you were standing right outside this store watching these people blow themselves up. It freaked me out. Like, that was I keep using the word, but it's true. That was a very disturbing scene. And I kept coming back to it later that night. So this is a very dark movie, just as the first one was. But in the theater, who is sitting right next to me but a guy who brought 3 little children with him? Bringing one child to Sicario would raise an eyebrow, okay? This mofo brought 3, okay? He brought 3 small the oldest one could not have been more than 8. All right? That's how young these kids were. And these kids are sitting there watching Sicario Day of the Soldado like it ain't no thing. Dude, come on. 3 kids? 3 kids! It's okay, I brought 3 toddlers with me when I went to go see Showgirls, so it's all good. So the plot of Day of Soldado follows our 2 lead characters from before, Alejandro, who is Benicio del Toro, and I can't remember his name, but Josh Brolin's character. Except this time, like I said, there's terrorists involved, and the U.S. government has reason to believe that the Mexican cartels are ferrying terrorists up across the border, and that's how ISIS members are getting into the country without passports. And because of this, the DEA gets a lot more leeway from the Secretary of Defense to be even more extreme in their methods through which they fight the drug cartels. So Josh Brolin is like a kid in a candy store. He's like, ooh, look at all this power. I'm just going to take some of this power, and I'm just going to take some of this power. And you know what? I'll have a little bit of those. You can never have too many of those powers either. So I'm set. So Brolin is giddy, and he is ready to get some stuff done his way. And of course, he recruits Alejandro again. And this is where I felt like there was a little bit of the bad sequelitis creeping into the plot, because there is a drug kingpin by the name of Reyes, and we don't see him in the movie. But the reason Alejandro comes on board for this mission, the way they explain it here, is that Reyes was giving orders to the drug kingpin from the previous movie, who is the one who killed Alejandro's family. So it's almost like they threw like video game logic at us or something. They're like, oh, okay, you beat the first boss last time, but now there's a bigger boss on top of that. Ooh, Sicario. And that's where it got a little bit, like, oh, I can feel them struggling for a sequel. It's the same writer as last time, and that's where I felt him going like, ugh, Hollywood is forcing me to make this movie. I'm sorry, guys. I'm doing the best I can. Please don't hate me. But that was the extent of where the bad sequelitis, left its stench. And the rest of it was following the story of trying to take down this big kingpin, Reyes. The way that they do that is they decide to incite a gang war between Reyes and another rival cartel. They pretend to be this other cartel, and they kidnap Reyes's teenage daughter, Isabella, hoping that this will incite a gang war. Then, of course, plans go awry, as they tend to do in movies like this. And that's all I'll say before we get to spoilers. In terms of plot, this is a neat plot. I like this. It makes sense from a logistic standpoint. Like, hey, why are we suddenly doing this even more extreme than we were last time? Oh, because the terrorists got involved. So now fighting the drug cartels is a matter of national security. Yeah, that makes sense. It's logical. The way they go about doing it, it's a different plan. There's this kid involved now, and everything is they're thrown out of their comfort zone. In the last movie, Brolin and Alejandro were very much in their comfort zones, and they were doing what they were best at, and they just kind of plowed through Emily Blunt's life and messed her up, but they were just cool as a cucumber. Now, these two characters start off where it's like, yep, we're doing our thing, and then they hit a speed bump, and they're like, our thing got thrown out of whack. How do we react to this? And they both react in different ways. That's how you do a sequel right, by putting the characters in places they haven't been yet, and shaking things up and seeing what happens when that snow globe turns into a blizzard. The actress who plays the little girl, her name is Isabella Moner. Talk about a great child actor. She was awesome. She knows her dad is one of the most powerful men in the crime world. And so she's got that spoiledness to her and that intensity to her where she's like, oh, you want to start something with me? You know who my dad is? Go ahead, start something with me. We'll see what happens. She's got that mentality. It makes her unpredictable. It makes her not just, another kid in a movie where they're like, oh, shucks. She's more dangerous than we, the audience, give her credit for. And she knows it. And she plays that. So she did a great job. And apparently that girl is going to be playing Dora the Explorer. There's going to be a Dora movie, a live-action movie where she's exploring the real world. And that's her. That's going to be Dora. That's pretty funny. I want to know who's playing the backpack. That's my... Where's that piece of news? So now it's spoiler time, I think, because a lot of shit goes down in Day of the Soldado that kind of changes things up, and we need to talk about that. Turns out there's more to the Americans' plan than we initially thought, and they're not just kidnapping the girl and trying to incite a gang war. They're also trying to get on the good side of the cartels by staging her rescue. They kidnap her, they blindfold her, they put her in a room, they pretend they're, this Mexican gang, and then they come in with DEA jackets as Americans, and they're like, hey, little girl, we're American soldiers. We're going to help you. We're going to take you back home. Again, going back to the greatness that was the first Sicario, it's the Americans doing corrupt as hell shit in order to fight more corrupt as hell shit. And it always raises that question, who's being more corrupt at this point? But I like that aspect of the plan, and it's moving along, and everything seems like it's going okay. But then trouble is a-brewing, and that trouble comes in the form of the Mexican police who are escorting this supposed rescue team back across the border. And now this is where it got a little bit muddy for me. But what I think happened was, it seems like those police officers were corrupt cops who were in the pockets of one of the cartels. I'm not sure which. I'm assuming not Reyes, because those cops opened fire on this convoy that was bringing the girl back across the border. So I'm assuming it was just another cartel who just wanted to kill the DEA. And because this went down this way, Brolin and Alejandro got separated. The girl ran off. Alejandro had to go find her, and Brolin's like, let me go back and deal with this back in Texas. And that whole shootout there, that was like the inciting incident that flips the story around and causes the two characters to be thrown out of their element. So I liked the consequences of it, but I was really unclear who wanted these cops to shoot at these Americans. And from that point on, the movie becomes Josh Brolin doing damage control and Benicio del Toro getting this girl back to her parents. And then they throw us for another loop where the American government suddenly discovers how those terrorists got into the country, and it turns out it had nothing to do with the cartels and the Americans were mistaken. But rather than openly admit to such a mistake, they order that Josh Brolin clean up all of this mission as if it never existed, so that they can hide the fact that they did this. And by clean up, obviously, they have ordered Josh Brolin to kill both the little girl and Benicio. And Brolin isn't really having that, and he has a crisis of conscience. I'm still not sure how I feel about that, because in the first movie, it was implied that Brolin had no real conscience. He wasn't a bad guy, but he wasn't a good guy. That's the whole point of Sicario. Most people are in the gray area, and Brolin was the definition of gray. He was corrupt, though. He was insanely corrupt, and in this movie he was again. So when they're suddenly like, kill this guy that you are kind of friends with, that's when he turns, and I think that it was a bit too Hollywood. Because he even calls Benicio, and he says, Benicio, they want you to kill the little girl. And Benicio's like, I'm not doing that. So both these characters are suddenly deciding that they have these big moral compasses and they're not going to stray from them. Where in the first movie, Josh Brolin was like, anything it takes to get my job done, I'm good. I don't care. I get to go home at the end of the day and have a steak dinner and pretend like everything's fine. And Alejandro, he not only killed his enemy, the drug lord, but he killed the drug lord's wife and I think 3 kids. Without even blinking, he was like, ba-bam, 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 done. So if there was some sort of moral switch in the interim between movies where Alejandro's like, you know what, I'm not killing kids anymore, that messed me up, that's fine. That's a reasonable excuse. I just wish we could have seen that decision happen. If you're just going from watching the first movie to watching the second movie, you're watching these two guys basically become monsters to fight monsters, and then in the second movie somebody's like, okay, you have to be a monster again, and they're like, how dare you, I would never do such a thing. So it doesn't really add up. That's why I say it feels more Hollywood. The first Sicario did not try to please us with a happy ending with fairies and butterflies. The second one still was not a happy ending, but it was much more clear that it was the good guys have won kind of ending. And again, that's not really what Sicario was about. Sicario was about, if you're good, you're gonna get stepped on by the bad and by the corrupt. And the bleakness of that first movie was, I think, what drew so many people to it, and its intensity. And this one tried to course correct that, and I don't think that was necessary. Not with Sicario. Sicario's good, baby. You don't need to make it the Care Bears all of a sudden, okay? We have the Care Bears already. It's called the Care Bears. We're good. My final quandary with this film was that it didn't really feel like it ended. It just sort of stopped. I don't know if they are planning a third one faux show. Like the way this ended, and I won't even really spoil that too much, but it ended in what I'm assuming was kind of a big cliffhanger. If they're going to do that but not announce Sicario 3, that's risky. Then you're in Golden Compass territory and you're just shooting yourself in the foot. But, you know, if they come out right now and say, yeah, guys, Sicario 3 is in pre-production and we're just putting the finishing touch on the script, then I'll be like, okay, cool. 2 feels like it makes more sense. Now I know, okay, the end of that puzzle piece is going to connect to the beginning of this next puzzle piece. But if there is no Sicario 3, then as it stands, it feels like we just got half of a movie. We never saw what happens with this war on Reyes. Reyes is never in the movie. So we don't get the final touch on that cartel war. We don't know if Josh Brolin and Alejandro ever meet again, because where we leave off, Brolin is ordered to kill him, and he defies those orders, but Alejandro does not know that. There's a lot of story left hanging. The funny thing is, because of the kind of movie it is, it could be construed as, yeah, it's supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to wrap up in a neat little bow because it's Sicario and it's dark. Or it could be construed as, there's a third one coming out, so don't worry, the story's going to continue. Either way, I wish they had been more clear on which way they were choosing. I think that's what my qualm is here. is I wish the movie had been more clear with either it doesn't matter what happens to Reyes because what matters is this happened right here, or Sicario 3 coming soon to a theater near you. Day of the Soldado had a lot of those great Sicario moments, but it does not hold up to the original. It's a series of thrilling scenes that put you on uncomfortable positions that sound like they're going to add up to something, but they don't. And I will watch it again to try and figure out the answer to that question of whether or not it's supposed to add up to a part 3 or not. But as it stands, I did like Sicario Day of the Soldado. I did have my fun. I did enjoy the deeply disturbing Sicario moments that it had. It was just a very different ride. If part 1 was a roller coaster, part 2 is one of those rides where they suspend you really high and then you wait like 40 seconds and then they drop you and then it's over right away. And you're like, oh, is it going to go up again? Or is that it? Or do I get off? Is there another ride after this? Is there a sequel to this ride? That's how it feels. It was still thrilling and it still turned your stomach in places, but it was kind of over before it started. But that is Sicario Day of the Soldado. I would recommend it if you have seen the first one. Just don't go in expecting the first one. That's all. And you'll have a great time. Because it is a worthy successor. Not an equal successor, but it is a worthy successor to what I believe is one of the most intense thrillers ever made. But that has been Thumb Together. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you here next time. Until then, in the words of Alejandro, adios. God, that part was so cool.